Happy Homebrew Wednesday, folks. Ryan here, enjoying an autumn harvest ale, a kit that my local homebrew shop sold me. That's good stuff right there, I tell you what. Well, thought maybe this week I'd talk a little bit about fermenters. Buckets, carboys, why would you use one over the other? Well, let's go to the brew kitchen, and I'll tell you some more about that.
Hey folks, Ryan here. This segment's more for the newbies out there, the ones who are thinking about getting into homebrewing, but aren't really sure about some of the things they need. So I want to focus this segment on fermenters. What can I ferment in? Well, really, honestly, the answer is you could probably ferment in just about any container. But specifically for homebrewing beer, here are your options. Now, the most popular option is a fermenting bucket. Okay? Most people starting out will ferment in these. Why? Well, this is a 6.5 gallon bucket. It has measurements on it to show you where the 5 gallon mark is, so when you have to top off, you can top off to 5 gallons. Also, that extra gallon and a half gives you enough room for fermenting. Some yeasts, when they ferment, are going to make a huge mess. If this bucket was exactly at 5 gallons, you would have things shooting out of the top of the bucket and a big mess to clean up, and that's not fun. Now, when you have a bucket, you're going to need a way for the gas to escape. That's why they have these grommeted lids. Now, some people's lids, and I've seen these and I don't know if they're homemade, will actually have a big hole in the middle for a carboy bung that goes in the top. These days, what I see mostly are the grommeted lids. So you'll just take an airlock, which are there's a couple different kinds of these that are out there, and you just put it in the hole. Then, once you fill your bucket up, you can put the lid on there. Now, I have stuff in this bucket, so I'm not going to actually fasten it on there. You understand the basic idea of a lid. Hopefully. And if not, maybe you shouldn't be watching. Now, the other option out there is the carboy. Now, this is a 5 gallon carboy. You're not going to want to do your primary fermentation in one of these. There's just not enough headroom on it. This would definitely bubble over, cause a huge mess. You'd need a blow-off tube. I'm not saying it's impossible, but you'd be wasting a good amount of beer. That's why they have 6 gallon carboys. Now, when it comes to carboys, there are glass and plastic ones. I suggest that if you're starting off, use plastic, just because they're lightweight. You can drop them and they won't break. Well, unless you're going to throw them into the ground, they shouldn't break. They're easy to use. The airlocks work the same way, except you put it in the carboy bung and you put the bung on the top and you're good to go. Depending on what kind of yeast you're going to use, you may have to set up a blow-off tube, which what I like to do. Now, you could get tubing that would fill up the whole top of the carboy and then go into another container filled with water or something to bubble out. Or you take a 3-piece airlock like this one, take it apart, and put the piece of tubing right over the center pipe in the airlock, and then put that on there, and then have the tubing going into a second container. So remember, if you're going to get into homebrewing, you'll want to use a 6.5 gallon or bigger bucket. There are 7.9 gallons out there that people use that come with starter kits. Or you'll want a carboy that's at least 6 gallons. The glass carboys also come in 5 and 6, and there are even some 6.5s out there. So if you get your hands on that, have at it. I think I'm just more worried about breaking glass. It's another reason I haven't started using it. But the benefits of glass are you can throw a brush in there to clean out the gunk. While the plastic ones, you don't want to do that because you scratch the insides up. And bacteria could grow in those scratches and could really ruin your brew. And nobody really wants that.
So there's one kind of important thing that I didn't really touch on is, well, should I use a bucket or should I use a carboy? Well, here's one thing that I've noticed, and I just used a 6-gallon plastic carboy for my second to last brew. First time ever, alright? Now, when I do things in buckets, I'm not totally sure that the buckets are airtight that I use. Maybe you have a bucket or you can get your hands on a bucket that really is airtight. I just haven't had that experience. And I say that because my airlocks rarely ever bubble on the bucket. Okay? So something tells me that there's just enough pressure that some of that gas is escaping out of the sides of the bucket, because I'm sure that the brew is making enough CO2 to fill that extra gallon and a half of airspace. But I could be wrong, and if someone out there wants to correct me on that, please do. Because I noticed the carboy, you have a rubber stopper sitting in the neck of the carboy, whether it's plastic or glass. So that's a pretty good seal. So there aren't really a lot of other places for things to get out. So they're all going to go out through that airlock. Okay? So I've had cases where I'd have a beer brewing really good and maybe got a couple bubbles out of the airlock. But then I'll notice there might be a little ring on the outside of the bucket of beer. Now, that tells me that it fermented really well, the bubbles got up, and then started to push out the sides a little bit. Now, to me, that if that was serious fermentation, it should have caused the airlock to bubble a lot. And that's not usually the case for me. I do notice if I use the S-style airlocks, that the reservoir one would be kind of, they wouldn't be leveled out. And usually for me, that's a good indicator of when it's done fermenting. Now, a lot of people tell you don't depend on that, okay? Your airlock is not the way you should be determining whether your brew is done fermenting. You should be taking gravity readings. Well, I'm kind of lazy, okay? I don't always want to go open the bucket, and I'm too nervous I'm going to screw it up. So if I see that things are leveled out and it's been more than a week, I'm confident it's done. And more than likely, I'm going to throw it into a secondary anyway and let it sit for another week or two, just to be on the safe side, so I don't really have much to worry about. Now, one more thing. You may not always be wanting to do a 5-gallon batch of beer. There's lots of 1-gallon kits out there too. So what do you use for those? Well, I guess you could use your 6.5-gallon bucket. I wouldn't recommend it. I would suggest getting one of these. This is a 1-gallon glass jug. Okay? Now, since it is 1 gallon and you're putting 1 gallon of beer in there, you can imagine the fermentation process may cause a little bit of a mess if you're just using an airlock. So, what do? Well, like I said in the video, you may want to set up a blow-off tube. If you have a 3-piece airlock, take it all apart, put your tube over the center pipe on the airlock. Let's see if I can get this out again. Alright, run the hose into a jug of water or star sand or whatever. Well, something clean. And you pretty much build another kind of airlock. And that's all you can do. It's not hard. It's vinyl tubing. You can get it from a local hardware store. You find something that says it's food grade, that'd be better. Usually most of it is, just because it's used for like ice makers. So homebrew shops, homebrew suppliers will have vinyl tubing too. Homebrewers use the stuff all the time for everything from siphoning to bottling. So get some of that if you want to set of blow off tube. Sometimes you will have that situation, even in a bucket, where you're going to have blow off. So you need to be prepared for that. We're also going to sit there cleaning out airlocks nonstop, and that can get really annoying. Um, that's all I got for you this week, guys. Have a happy Homebrew Wednesday. Hope to see you next week. Cheers.